All right, Bakari. They stuck us at the end of this.
With no coffee in the building. Hopefully we keep them awake for the next 40 minutes.
Let's see what we can do. I think you and I have been tasked to talk about what I consider, and some others may consider to be the elephant in the room a little bit.
Okay.
We're supposed to talk about how to navigate this legal landscape that has somehow come down upon DEI. And just a few years ago, DEI seemed to be the darling of many conversations, and everybody was behind it, and everybody was promoting it. And all of a sudden, here we are now, and if we tell the truth, DEI is under attack. So before we dig into that, I want you to have the same opportunity that others have had in terms of, let's talk about first, from a corporate standpoint, what do you see the benefits of DEI to be for all of our representatives for businesses?
That's a good question. First, let me say that my mom and dad would always say the two most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have, there we go, amen.
Got some cousins back there.
I know, can't take us nowhere. We have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody. Natasha, where's Natasha? Please give her a round of applause for just everything she's been doing and looking fabulous in forest green while she is doing it. So thank you so much, Natasha. So you asked a good question. You asked a big question to start off. But thank you for your service.
Thank you.
As well. I mean, elected officials, I'm the best type of legislator. I'm retired. I was like, when he told me he was running, I was like, why? But a lot of times we come to you and we complain or we give you our issues of the day, but very rarely do we just reach out to our elected officials and say thank you for the work that you're doing. So
Appreciate
I definitely applaud all the work that you're doing. Give him a round of applause as well. So it's funny. I am here to have this discussion only because Natasha asked me to. This is a conversation I really don't like to have.
Okay.
It's a lot like the fact I don't really talk about Martin Luther King because his legacy has been so whitewashed and bastardized. People treat him like he was some docile individual, not some rabid revolutionary. And so very rarely do when I speak or go out on, when I speak on King Day, I really don't even quote King, fascinatingly enough, because that's a whole nother discussion to be had. The question of the value of diversity is one that's difficult for me to wrap my hands around because I am somewhat presumptuous in believing that everyone should understand what the value of diversity is. Now, we have a few perversions in the way that we speak to each other and the way that corporate America in particular interacts with one another. One, I think, is very perverted, the way we teach leadership. That's another discussion. But also, in corporate America, and a lot of times when we get uncomfortable, there is this concept of color blindness, which is just stupid. Right? And so a lot of people believe they are doing good by telling you that they don't see color. And I say, well, you know, they can probably fix that today if you're truly colorblind. But I would prefer you to see everything I bring to the table. I want you to see that I'm a country boy who jumped ditches, who used to break into Voorhees and Denmark Tech in the summer to play basketball. I want you to see that I'm the son of someone who helped found some small fledgling civil rights organization called SNCC. I want you to know that my mother was a part of the desegregating class of Hamilton High School. I want you to know that I'm a product of an historically black college or university. And I want you to be able to see all of those things. And if you're colorblind, you truly can't. I want you to be able to see all of those things because inherently, I believe that I will bring value to whatever that conversation is because of all of who I am. And so I think that if we begin to see individuals for who they truly are, their entire being, then we will get more value out of our employees, colleagues, partners, et cetera. And for individuals in corporate America, one of the things, particularly black folk, we try to assimilate. We try to code switch I haven't code switched since Sally Mae used to call me all the time asking for their student loan money back. You know, you put that good voice on when they call you, be like, hello. Yeah. But a lot of times when we're in these corporate environments, we don't bring our full self. You know, we're afraid of the way people may judge our hair or the ethnicity of our name, so maybe we have a nickname, or we're afraid of speaking too loudly, or we're afraid of emoting, or whatever it may be. And I would encourage everyone in this room, as we're talking about diversity, if you want somebody to be able to see truly who you are, you have to bring your full self to the table.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all those benefits that you just described can actually be translated into economic benefits.
Oh, there's a huge ROI. I think that, and one of the things that we have to be honest about is that we have never been in this post-racial America that people wanted us to be in. I'm very close to the 44th president of the United States, and oftentimes push back on him for that notion, and I think that he probably would agree that he may have articulated we were in some post-racial America, but we're not there. And I think that, you know, George Floyd put us in this interesting place. Mm-hmm. And I do have another theory about George Floyd, but it put us in an interesting place where individuals believed that we were beyond some of the more difficult conversations that were necessary to be had. And I don't necessarily buy into that, and I think it's borne out to be true. Because now we're having these debates about DEI, we're having these debates about critical race theory, we're having these debates about affirmative action, we're seeing laws being passed or rulings coming down from the Supreme Court or district courts, whether or not it's gerrymandering, or whether or not it's the Fearless Fund, or whether or not it's Students for Fair Admission. All of these cases, my grandma used to, you know how old folks say stuff that don't make sense to you until you get older?
You get a little older, absolutely.
My grandma used to say that you can't fall off the floor, which to an 8-year-old makes no sense. But right now, it really feels like if you're an immigrant in this country, a woman in this country, if you're black in this country, a woman, that it feels like we're all on the floor. Mm-hmm. And I think DEI and the work that people in this room are doing is an interesting way in which we can all get up.
So Bakari, given all of those pluses, mm-hmm. let's cut to the heart of the matter.
Sure.
Why is it being attacked legislatively, state to state? Why is it under fire?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I think that inherently the word I would use to undergird the attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion is fear.
Okay.
There is a fear of being replaced.
Who's being replaced?
Well, I don't think the fear is founded.
Okay.
But I do think that fear is pushing it and driving it. You know, there is this theory that in 2040 or some change that we will be a majority-minority country. And there is an inherent fear in that change and uncomfortability in what that may look like. And I think what you're seeing across the country, the landscape is being pushed because of that fear. And the question is, do we reject it or not? And even more importantly, the question is, how do we reject it? And I think, you know, for me, I'm not, my dad is my hero. He's also a very interesting historical figure. I always tell people, if my dad is proud, that means I'm doing something right. But I grew up in a household where I got a chance to call people like Julian Bond uncle, and somebody who I was able to kind of love and adore. I love Julian Bond a lot. I was a part of his last explorations in black leadership at the University of Virginia. And Uncle Julian, like many people in the movement, but Uncle Julian, he used to always talk about dedicating himself to the notion of loving your neighbor. And this is gonna sound real cheesy, but it's true, but it's like a loving your neighbor ... because we are in a position in this country, those of us who value things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and amongst many others, where we have to love our neighbors even when they don't love us. And if you think about how difficult that concept is, I think that's the only way you can push back on this. I mean, you have to you have to be willing to fight, but you can't be enveloped in that fear. You can't be enveloped in that hate because somebody may look different, somebody may learn different. My kids go to public schools in South Carolina. I never say where, people are crazy, but they go to public school in South Carolina, and we, unfortunately, have to take it upon ourselves to also teach our kids what history is in this state.
Okay.
And when you think about that, history makes people uncomfortable. History is also one of the coolest things in the entire world. I think history is absolutely the most fascinating subject because history never changes. It literally never changes. What happened yesterday will always be what happened yesterday. Now, y'all may lie about it, but it literally never changes. It's a fascinating thing. And so when you think about the progress we've made in this country is beautiful because it has evolved. But you have to recognize the price that was paid for that progress to be had. And that's when the conversation gets complicated and difficult for some people. Because I actually would articulate that every ounce of change we've had in this country has been because of black blood that flowed through the streets. And I would love to have that conversation because people would push back on me and be like, tell me more. And I say, well, we don't get the 1964-65 Voting Rights Act without the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
True.
We don't get the Fair Housing Act of 1968 without the assassination of King. We're literally not even talking about criminal justice reform without George Floyd having a knee on his neck for 9 minutes. And so we don't even, for those of you all in this room, it's a very personal story for me, but we used to be the state when I worked up there, I was 21 years old when I got elected. I took a deep breath under the auspices of the Confederate flag every day. And I'm from Bamberg, I love Nikki, but she's not the reason the flag came down. I tell her about that all the time. 9 people literally had to die in a church for the Confederate flag to come down in South Carolina. So when you think about history and you begin to have those conversations, I believe that to be our history. I believe that to be fact. It's borne out by reality, but those conversations are hard. Those conversations are not ones that people want to have all the time. And we really don't do a good job of having these conversations because a lot of times, I may fall victim to this, I try not to, but people in this room, if people are ignorant, don't know, or afraid to ask a question, then we want to write them off or cancel them, as the kids say. And we have to move away from that. We have to become more inquisitive. We have to meet people where they are. We have to allow people to ask questions. We need to be able to ask questions about why diversity matters, where you're from. I want people to challenge me on my thoughts, allow me to challenge them on theirs, do a lot of listening, a lot more listening than talking. All of these things are necessary if we're going to get back to having the free flow of information. And that free flow is very important because right now we're kind of McDonaldized. People want the information when they want it, how they want it, in their way. And I'm partly to blame, but social media and the 24-hour news network have done true damage to our democracy and the conversations that we're having.
Yeah. You alluded to something a few minutes ago about how we defend this. And tell us your thoughts about that. And speaking specifically in context of the people that are here, the business leaders, the business owners, what's the incentive?
Well, if anybody's ever seen me drink tequila, they will know that I'm the furthest thing from a pastor, first. But second, there are a lot of people in this room that have a lot of faith that things will change. And then they go back to their daily task and they do the same stuff over and over and over again with faith that it's going to change. Yeah. But the book in James teaches us what?
Faith without works.
I know I was expecting somebody in the audience, but they need to go to Bible study tomorrow. Call and response usually works, especially in Greenville. It fell flat at that moment right there. So thank you. But faith without works is dead, and so you have to be willing. I ain't saying go get fired, but I'm saying that that's the line, step right up to it, right? Be willing to have those uncomfortable conversations or courageous, I think is the word, courageous conversations that are necessary to have. And I think particularly on college campuses, we've gotten away from the free flow and dialogue. I was speaking at a campus and they were like, "Can you believe Ben Shapiro is here?" I was like, "Yes, it's a college campus. I don't rock with him, but it's a college campus."
Yeah.
Right? You should not be fired or your job be in danger because you have somebody else exchange ideas. And I think we have to be willing to exchange those ideas freely, some of which are going to offend your common notion of good, will offend your moral value of good, but we have to be willing to create environments where people can continue to sharpen themselves and push back against that, something you do a lot 6 months out the year.
These conversations that you speak of, how is this affecting now, and how do you perceive it's going to affect us in the future in terms of our global standing, our state standing from an economic standpoint?
I don't really do future questions. I have really bad anxiety. Not performance anxiety, but I have a general anxiety disorder. I mean performance with the stage, y'all. They didn't know no scripture.
They didn't know the scripture.
They didn't know no scripture, but they picked up on that.
This was an ED commercial. Okay.
They be watching those commercials, people running through the fields.
Those late night commercials, I understand.
So I have really bad anxiety. I'm afraid of failure and death. Those are my two biggest fears. And what it does is it only, I live in 24-hour increments.
Okay.
So asking me about the future is not really something I'm built to talk about.
Okay.
I try to win days. Will Smith once told me, he said, if you have enough good effing days, you have a good effing life. And so I figure if I win 6 out of every 10 days, if you shoot 60%, bat 600, you go into the Hall of Fame. So I kind of live my life trying to go to the Hall of Fame and win one day at a time. So I don't know about the future. We have to figure that out when we get there together. But I think that one of the things that we have to begin to do is be more active and somewhat proactive in truly explaining, teaching what diversity, equity, and inclusion are. Being proactive not only in the courtroom, but in the classroom, in corporate America as well. I'm not talking about having a month.
Right.
People love having a month or a day.
Check the box.
Somebody tried to tell me that in the barbershop, the reason we have Black History Month is because it's the shortest month of the year. And I said, man, if you don't read a book, right? I mean, everybody has a month or a day. But what we have to do is be willing to meet people where they are. I used to work with a gentleman named Glenn McConnell. Y'all know who Glenn is? People forget quickly. Y'all don't remember Glenn McConnell? He was the most powerful man in South Carolina for about 20 years. He was a president of the Senate. He used to own a Confederate memorabilia shop. And he ended up being president of College of Charleston. Great man. We just really had a difference of opinion because of our history and where we came from. And so Glenn was speaker. I was a young member of the General Assembly. And we used to get you get these manuals every year, which is good. Y'all should go get one. Get your elected official, get him to get you one. But it has everybody's bio in there, little tidbits about them, family name, where you go to church, that type of thing. And one of the things I learned about Glenn McConnell was that, one, he was Episcopalian, like I am. And two, he loved Deal or No Deal. Y'all remember Deal or No Deal? And so I'm decently silly, but also have a kind of way about things, kind of ordered. And so one night I just watched a bunch of episodes of Deal or No Deal. And the next day I went up and had a long conversation with Glenn McConnell. The first part of the conversation was about Deal or No Deal. And the second part of the conversation was about the Episcopal Church. And then every time we saw each other, we talk about Deal or No Deal, the Episcopal Church, we talk about family. Then we got to know each other. And then we became friends. Our voting record was probably diametrically opposed, but we became friends. And then I was able to build a library in Denmark and, widen some highways in Bamberg County and bring a manufacturing door company because we were friends. I didn't start the conversation with, why you like them Confederate flags? Or, what's your opinion on abortion? right? I didn't really start the conversation there kind of hot out the gate, which is where a lot of us really want to start conversations. Like, why you don't like diversity, equity, inclusion? What you got against black people? Like, that usually will not be a productive conversation. And so I believe if we do a better job of having full, healthy conversations that are not in 240 or 180 characters, actually get to know the people we work with or the decision makers, that's probably where you can start at having healthy conversations. I know that sounds kind of passé, but I actually think that's valuable because that's not something we have right now.
Agreed.
We haven't said anything profound. They have not clapped once. This might be the most dead room we've been in a while.
I'm gonna tell myself they're in awe.
You got to do some more Don Lemon or something. Get this crowd going. It's your questions. It's not.
All right, here we go. Let's talk about this. I read the statement in preparation for the day that said, DEI is a threat to American society. How does that hit you? And also in that same vein, what is it threatening?
You have to tell me who said the statement. Do you remember?
I was reading some stuff
Because I mean,
that the Manhattan Institute published.
well, I mean, a lot of things you have. First of all, thank you. I mean, you're doing something a lot of people don't do. You're reading. So I mean, y'all laugh. Enough of y'all don't read either, which is kind of why we here. So yes, you know, you ask the right questions. Like, how is it a threat? Why is it a threat? And to whom is it a threat?
Yeah.
And then even the most important question is like, how do you see America? Like, what is your definition of America?
Yeah.
You know, I get it, like, you know, land of the free, home of the brave. I get that. But for me, I think that she's imperfect.
Right.
And
And
I
it's
think
okay to say that.
And I think one of the greatest things I can do is continue to challenge her. Because the check that she's written a lot of us has come back insufficient funds. Right? So my challenge is to make her a more perfect union every single day.
Yeah.
And so people ask, well, how dare you say that? You know, what gives you the right to say that? And I say, well, the blood of my family runs through the soil of this great country, just like many of your family members and grandparents. I mean, my father was shot in Orangeburg. That's not a secret. Everybody knows he was shot so that we could be in a room like this, so we could have DEI. You know, my grandfather went to Vietnam. You know, those type things. And so when you begin to have these conversations with people, you have to be willing to push and push and push her to be a more perfect union. And so I challenge a lot of people on what they believe America to be. I mean, I guess depending on what you watch every night, you'll get a different opinion. And you know, it's funny because I won't go there, but there are a lot of conversations that people are just unwilling to have. Those courageous conversations we keep coming back to. Yeah. You know, one of the things that we do on CNN is we do these, not just CNN, but MS does it, Fox does it a lot. But we have these conversations about working class voters. Makes me furious. Because we'll go to this diner in like Iowa, and we'll interview a room full of like white folk. And we'll be like, we're gonna talk about working class voters. Well, I'm from the low country. Y'all know what the bomb plant is? Savannah Riverside, when we grew up, it was called the bomb plant. Everybody, there was at least one person in your family that worked at the bomb plant. When I grew up, working class voters, if you guys look around this room, this is what the working class looked like. We begin to pigeonhole people in these little categories, in these pockets, because it makes it easier for us to analyze them or deduce how they may vote or whatever it may be, instead of actually taking a step back and looking at the totality of who individuals are. And so that's just something that I try to do in my daily work, is when I have a conversation about working class individuals, I have a conversation about rooms that look like this.
Speaking of those challenging conversations, how do Give us some advice. How do we go about really talking to our neighbors? You know, we've been speaking about the people, the politicians and the decision makers who are really pushing a lot of this. And it's fueled by this fear that's being pumped into society. That's why they use the word threat. How do we have dinner table, lunchtime conversations to ease the fears of those who now believe that DEI is somehow threatening them in their pursuit of this American dream?
What if I told you those conversations weren't ones that you and I are to have?
Tell me more.
You know, there's a lot of times when we may have an amazing message, or may be the right message, but we're not the right messenger.
Okay.
A lot of individuals that are afraid of what it may present have not had the experiences that we've had. And so there are a lot of people who need to spend time with their own families, in their own communities, in their own churches, having those conversations with their friends, their relatives, their loved ones, their parishioners, their colleagues, their country club members, their sorority sisters, their, you know, wherever they went to college, their old college friends about, you know, why does this, I've known you since you were this big, right? I remember I bonded you out of jail the second time, right? And like, tell me why, what is this fear? You know, where does this fear arise from? And they might tell you some BS like, have you seen Baltimore? Or have you seen Chicago? You know, these kind of red herrings that people always want to talk about. And if that's the conversation, then you got a lot of work to do. But if it's just that I don't understand or I don't know or I need to learn more, people are trying to take away my history, they're trying to teach this instead of that, maybe we have to do a better job of showing the enriching spirit or nature of what diversity really is. And that we're not trying to teach all white kids that they should feel guilty.
Right.
I'm not trying to do that. But what I would like to do is teach the full history of the state of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
Do y'all know who wrote the South Carolina Constitution? See, that was a serious question for somebody to answer. Pitchfork Ben Tillman?
Somebody said something out there.
Y'all know how Pitchfork got his name? Okay. What about John C. Calhoun? Y'all familiar with him?
Oh, yeah.
Y'all know what they used to call John C. Calhoun? John C. Killicoon. I mean, it's just like...
And his statue stands tall.
I ain't worried about the statue. That's not my ministry, though. People want to go out here and paint streets and tear down statues. Man, I ain't got time for that. I mean, if it's your ministry, I'm going to pay for it.
He's a constant reminder
I get it, I know, but I got other stuff to do. My back hurt today. Anyway, I can't be out there trying to tear down no statue. But that's just history.
Yeah.
You know, I'm close with Lil Strong and Paul. Their big sister's name is Essie Mae. Right? We know that, right?
Yeah.
Have y'all ever seen Strom Thurmond's statue on the grounds? It's an amazing statue, not for how it looks, because Strom is one of the greatest individuals public servants. I mean, everybody probably doesn't want to legislate like Strom, but in terms of the constituent services, if anybody in South Carolina needed something that they called Strom, your grandma got stories. If they needed something, they called Strom and he'd do it. Go look at his statue though. And it's cool. It's an amazing thing. On his statue, you see where they struck out 4 and put 5 children. And you see where they put Essie Mae.
Her name's on there.
Right in the name of him, after the statue was erected. Does that make him any lesser of a man? No. But is that a part of our history? Is our history complicated? Yes. Is it okay to teach the complicated nature of our history so we learn about who people really are? See, I don't understand what the fear is in that.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just willfully blind, which is possible. But I also just believe that there is such great value in who we are, how complicated we are. And I think that there's something nourishing about teaching the totality of the human spirit and the human nature.
I like what you said, that this whole notion, because you made me shift when you said that, this whole notion that the conversations start with people that look like us, basically what you're saying. the messenger needs to be able to relate to the group before they deliver the message.
Correct.
In that message, especially with the folks that are listening now, and hopefully give them a clarion call and an action item to leave it with. How do we go about that, though, Bakari? Where do we start with?
My clarion call would, I said clarion like I'm going down country. Clarion call would be the world is in a very interesting place right now. And if China moves in the direction of Taiwan, and you can utilize direction for whatever it may be, then the world will become warmer. And so I think my clarion call would probably be that we need to not just pray more, but do the work from Monday to Saturday. And I'm a big proponent of everybody leaving this room and writing down one or two things, tangible ideals, that they can do simply to help understanding and build community. For me personally, I believe words like hope, love, truth, justice, and peace, I believe those are verbs, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of you all don't treat them as such. You're like, I hope something will happen. I love you. Let's go get justice. Well, if you love someone, you have to show them that. It's a verb. Justice requires you to do just. And so hope requires you to order your steps. And so what I would challenge individuals in this room is to take a peer and someone younger than them, in a generation that's not their own, and begin to have those courageous conversations with them. Understanding individuals you work with that you have never had a conversation with that's not about work, asking simple questions like, how was your day? Or how is your family? Or is there anything I can do better just to help you in this environment or this workplace? I think we have to do a better job working on us. And I think that when we begin to have those conversations, because right now we're just so divided.
Yeah.
It's like Fox News versus CNN, Democrat versus Republican, upstate versus lower state, black versus white. Everything is just so divided that we have to do something innately, concretely, every single day to go out and try to bring about that change we want to see. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight. My dream is that it happens before Sadie and Stokely go off to college. I can't leave them this world. I just can't. I mean, I didn't do my job if I leave Sadie and Stokely the world that we have right now. Because I would just be a terrible human being. And that means every day I have to get out and do that much more work to help try to rebuild community. And I know that was kind of a lofty answer. It wasn't concrete. But a lot of times we have to figure out what those things are in ourselves and what we're good at. And so how we can go out and implement that change.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. A lot of these folks are going to have to leave it today and try to figure out how to champion this in this environment where now there's growing threat of legal pushback. As you know, several of the attorneys generals throughout this nation.
I mean, that's easy. I mean, the answer to that is you ask for forgiveness, not permission. I mean, a lot of y'all spend all day long paralyzed because you've been waiting on permission. And the reason that you have diversity, equity, inclusion, the reason that we're here is because the generation before us who did the work never asked for permission.
Right.
They just went out there and did the work. I'm not encouraging anybody to lose their job tomorrow, okay? Some of y'all do need to move on. You know, seriously, some of y'all need to do some introspection and realize that you've outgrown where you are. Your ideas are bigger than where you are. Your purpose is larger than where you are. And that's a conversation you got to have between you and your God. That's on you. Mm-hmm. But for everybody else, do not be paralyzed by waiting on permission.
Love it.
I mean, go out there and do it. Have a courageous conversation. Bring you and what's the chair of the family caucus? What's his name?
McCravey.
McCravey. Y'all friends?
Working on it.
The best way to be friends is go out on stage at somebody's campus or building and have a courageous conversation and take them to Ryan. Don't spend a lot of money on them yet, but take them to Ryan's afterwards. That soft serve ice cream will make anybody your friend.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I mean, have a meal, break bread with somebody.
Yeah.
Do something you ain't do before. Who wants to host that conversation? Y'all know who McCravey is? There we go. That'll sell out too.
Yes, it would.
Yes, it would.
Last thing for you, Bakari. It seems right now that it's getting so strenuous that there are several corporations that are now reaching up to the federal level because they're looking for some type of protection from this. Because they believe, they see, like you just expressed earlier, that this really impacts my bottom line. You know, all the data says that. Says folks that have a diverse workforce, they normally do about 25% better than their peers. 2/3 of their customers want them to do that.
Because you know, I mean, you can see like ads and you can see people's statements and what we whisper to each other in the group chat. They ain't had no black folk in that room.
Right. But they're asking for help now. They're asking for some type of federal protection or guidance. So what do you think the Biden administration could do to insulate the folks who are serious about
It's very
this?
difficult. We were not proactive enough at the beginning. And so you saw a lot of these cases meander their way to the courts and make it to the Supreme Court. And you've seen a lot of rulings come down that are just, when I look at rulings, for example, I don't look at that particular ruling. I look at the slippery slope it may cause.
Yes.
So when you look at students for fair admissions and the abolishing of affirmative action in certain institutions, you have to see how that's going to permeate into other places of business.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see that
And
as
that's
well.
where we are now.
When you see the abortion ruling, it's not about abortion. You know, I knew that was dead when it went there, you know, but you begin to look and you see, man, that's an attack on gay marriage. Mm-hmm. That's an attack on interracial marriage. That's an attack on, if you follow the reasoning, on Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yes.
You know, so where does it go? And we have just not played that game really well. It's not anything that the Biden administration can do over the next 2 or 6 years or whatever that may do to insulate people in this room from those pressures. Those pressures will be insulated at the ballot box.
Okay. So it sounds to me like you're saying the is just going to have to be a courageous move on our part.
I believe. So I always tell folk when they ask me questions like that, like, change that we want to see never happens at 1600 or at the United States Capitol. That makes for good TV, but there's more change that could be had at your Greenville City Council.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true.
Your local school boards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're worried about what they're teaching in schools, I mean, the problem, watch this. I'm embarrassing folk, and I'm not trying to. These are business folk, right? Mm-hmm. Good, solid business.
Good, solid people.
Business folk.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you've been to a city council meeting in the last year. Okay, we good. Keep your hands up. All right, raise your hand if you've been to a school board meeting in the last year. A little bit less. Okay, so we're at about 30% in this room, which means there's a lot of work to be done. Mm-hmm. And the audacity of me to come here and tell y'all that y'all got to get up and do more, and I don't care if you vote Democrat or Republican, encourage folk to vote. Y'all in Greenville, so I'm assuming 75% of y'all vote anyway. But I want you guys to get up and do more. I want you to participate in school board meetings, participate in your local city council meetings, participate in county council meetings. Democracy is participatory. And I don't care who you vote for. You can literally have a MAGA hat on. But if you believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, those things may be counterintuitive, but for the purpose of my example, follow me here for the purpose of my example. Like, if you believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, there will be people on city council who are more likely to listen to you.
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
There's some people who look like you, who vote like you, who are ignorant to the things that we're talking about today, that you need to go and pull aside and say, that ain't all the way right. And so I believe we just have to do more and understand that everything that we're doing is decently participatory, and we're not doing our part in that. But shout out to everybody who actually went to a city council meeting. If you weren't getting honored at the city council meeting or something, actually went. People raise their hand because they got a day, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But shout out to you guys. We need to have more of that.
Awesome. Well, you've given us some great information. I want to give you the chance that if there's anything left that I didn't touch on that you want to say before leaving the stage. I know you got to get back because trick-or-treating is waiting on you.
Man, I'm tired. We flew up yesterday and flew back. I took my twins to the White House to go trick-or-treating. They're 4, and they'll be 5 in January. And so they were miserable this morning when they had to get up at 6:30 to go to school. And so we're going to go trick-or-treat today at 5:30 and hopefully be in bed by 7:30. That is, so y'all pray for me. I am, with Russia invading Ukraine, with what happened October 7th and everything that's happened since in Gaza and those southern, I've actually been to Sderot, which is a kibbutz along the southern part of Israel. Had dinner with one of the families in that kibbutz that is no longer with us. Everything that is tenuous in between China and Taiwan, the debates that we're having that rage in our local school boards about what our children are being taught, and books by Terry McMillan being taken out of schools, which is patently absurd. With the fact that we're going to have, 2 octogenarians running for president of the United States, a United States Congress that was unable to get a speaker for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. The just dysfunction that is our United States Congress. Mm-hmm. The weird dysfunction you all have in Colombia. Mm-hmm. It's like 6 caucuses right now: the Family Caucus, the Freedom Caucus, the Republican Caucus, the Democratic Caucus, and then everybody else who shows up for just the receptions. Even with all that going on in the world, I'm still pretty hopeful. Because only when it's darkest can you see the stars. And it's dark as hell right now. But I do see an entire generation of young people that deserve our grace. Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of people in this room who want to do better, who want to do more along the lines of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they deserve our grace too. I think grace is one of the more fascinating words in the English language, and I'll finish here. But I just give me a little point of personal privilege. Grace is the only thing that we don't give enough to ourselves and enough to others. I go to Applebee's a lot on Garner's Ferry because they have a really good happy hour. And they serve, like, the bartender, she serves drinks like the liquor's not hers. And so don't you hate when you go to a restaurant and get a drink and she act like she measuring and stuff? Like, girl, if you don't pour that liquor, it ain't yours. And I talked to my bartender and I asked her how old she was. And what year was she born? And she said she was born in 2000 and. I said, there's more? And I thought about it. And this is those kind of sleepless nights I have. I was like, man, she was born in 2000. She's lived through 9/11, a housing crisis, financial crisis, election of the first black president, creation of the Tea Party, re-election of the first black president, largest mass shooting in the history of the country in Las Vegas, Nevada, Parkland, church shooting at Mother Emanuel, Fort Hood shooting, election of Donald Trump, COVID, Russia invading Ukraine, October 7th, unease in the Middle East and Gaza, Israel, Egypt, surrounding countries. And she's still here. And she's doing all right. A lot of these young folk have lived through generations of trauma in 2 decades
Very true.
under the auspices of social media. You know, some of y'all would not be here if you had social media back in the day.
Yeah, right.
I see my man right there with the badge on shaking his head. He was like, look.
Yeah, unemployable.
He was, yeah, me too, listen. Some of these older folk in here, they still nervous about that Freaknik documentary coming out on Hulu.
Right. Right.
And I say all that to say that there's an entire generation of young people that we need to give a little bit more grace to.
Yeah.
Because they made it, and then we need to give ourselves that grace. When you're having these courageous conversations about diversity and equity and inclusion, everybody's not going to understand you. Everybody's not going to know from whence you've come. They're not going to understand where you come from, so they may not get where you're going, but give them a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised where the conversation can go. Thank you all.
Thank you, man.